reality. We like to think it's built on something solid: gold, hard work, productivity, value. But what if the most powerful institutions on Earth quietly rewrote that reality? What if the laws of money, time, and even value itself no longer apply? Today, the numbers in your bank account, your savings, your salary, your debts, aren't just accounting entries. They're a part of a grand illusion, engineered and maintained by a handful of institutions that exist above politics, above governments, and in many ways, above the law. They're called central banks. And over the last century, they didn't just change finance, they changed reality itself. This is the story of how a few unelected economists turned paper into power, and power into control. Quietly, legally, and almost completely unnoticed. To understand how central banks reshaped the world, we need to go back to when money was still real. For most of human history, money was tied to something tangible: gold, silver, salt, land, labor. It represented stored energy, the proof of past effort. But as trade expanded, people realized carrying gold was risky and inconvenient. So bankers began issuing receipts, pieces of paper promising gold on demand. These receipts became the first form of representative money. At first, it was simple. Each note had gold behind it. But over time, a small, almost invisible change occurred. Bankers realized most people never came back for their gold at the same time, so they started issuing more receipts than gold reserves. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking, and the first quiet rewrite of reality. Money was no longer a store of value. It became a promise, and promises could be multiplied infinitely. The people who controlled this process, the ones who could create or restrict money, discovered something extraordinary. Control the supply of money, and you control the behavior of entire nations. The 17th and 18th centuries saw the rise of nation-states, and with them, massive debts. Wars were expensive, and governments constantly needed funds. Enter the Bank of England, founded in 1694. It became the first true central bank, designed to lend money to the government. At interest, from then on, money creation wasn't just about trade. It was about control. Governments could wage wars without immediately taxing citizens. They could borrow instead, and those who issued the loans, the central banks, gained leverage over kings, parliaments, and nations. By the 20th century, nearly every major power had established a central bank, but one institution would soon dominate them all. The Federal Reserve, founded in 1913. It was presented as a safeguard against financial crises, a stabilizing force. But hidden within its design was a new philosophy of money. That money was not a reflection of wealth, but a tool of management. For the cadets, the global economy operated under the gold standard, a simple rule. Every paper note could be converted into gold. It limited how much money governments could create. It limited debt, and it limited power. But limits are inconvenient, especially during war. In World War I, nations suspended gold convertibility. They printed money to fund the conflict, promising to return to gold later. They never truly did. The 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement attempted to restore order. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency, backed to be gold while other currencies pegged to the dollar. But by the 1960s, the cracks were showing. America was spending far more than it earned, funding both a war in Vietnam and massive domestic programs. Foreign nations, sensing weakness, began demanding gold instead of paper. Then came the moment that changed everything. August 15th, 1971, President Richard Nixon. I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That temporary suspension never ended. Money was no longer tethered to anything real. From that day forward, reality itself was real. The dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore. It was backed by faith, and the central banks, through their power to print, had gained the authority once reserved for gods, the ability to create value out of nothing. Once the link to gold was gone, the printing presses roared to life. Governments could now spend without restraint. Banks could lend without limit, and debt, once seen as a burden, became the very engine of economic growth. This new system had a logic of its own. When economies slowed, central banks cut interest rates. When markets crashed, they printed more money to stimulate demand. The result, asset prices soared: stocks, real estate, and corporate profits. While wages stagnated, the wealth gap widened. Speculation replaced productivity, and inflation quietly eroded the value of every paycheck. But the most dangerous illusion of all was this: that central banks could control reality forever. By the 2008 financial crisis, the system was addicted to cheap money. To save it, central banks printed trillions out of thin air, a process called quantitative easing. It worked temporarily. Markets recovered, but the fundamental rule had been shattered. Actions no longer needed consequences. Money creation became the default solution to every problem, and the more they printed, the more detached the economy became from reality. Central bankers began believing they could fine-tune the world like a machine, adjusting interest rates here, printing a bit more there. But the machine had become too complex. Each new fix created new distortions. Cheap money inflated asset bubbles. Rising prices fueled inequality, and global debt soared beyond comprehension. Over $315 trillion by 2025. Every solution demanded another round of intervention. The rules of reality, cause and effect, risk and reward had been suspended. Now, governments and citizens live in a world where debt never truly gets repaid. Inflation quietly taxes the poor, and central banks decide who thrives and who collapses. Digital currencies and central bank digital coins, CBDCs, are being introduced as the next evolution, promising stability, but threatening absolute control. Every transaction traceable, every account programmable, every rule rewritable again. History rhymes, even when technology changes. In ancient Rome, emperors diluted silver coins to fund wars, until the empire collapsed under its own fake money. In revolutionary France, paper assignats replaced gold, until hyperinflation destroyed the economy. In Weimar Germany, printing presses ran day and night, until people needed wheelbarrows to buy bread. Each time, leaders claimed it was temporary. Each time, it was for the good of the people, and eight-time reality snapped back. Today. Today, central banks have built the most sophisticated illusion yet. A digital version of money that doesn't just measure value. It defines Italiano, but can something built on endless promises truly last forever? The story of central banking isn't just about economics. It's about the power to rewrite the rules of reality itself. Because when money loses its meaning, everything tied to it, time, work, savings, freedom, starts to unravel. 3 takeaways. Money is no longer real. It's a managed illusion. The numbers change, but the power remains with those who control creation. Debt is the true currency of our time. It fuels growth, but chains entire nations to endless repayment. Central banks don't just react to the world, they shape it. Every policy, every crisis response, quietly redefines what value means. The rules of money have been rewritten, and most people never noticed. But awareness is the first step in taking back control. Because if a few can rewrite reality, then maybe, together, we can rewrite it back. How central banks quietly rewrote the rules of reality. Subscribe for more untold stories about money, power, and the hidden systems shaping our world.